Hi, I'm Julian Birkinshaw. I'm the person you've been watching the videos of in this last week, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of a roundup of what the course has been about and what's been achieved this week. Congratulations all of you who made it through the videos for the week. We've been monitoring all of the discussion threads, and there have been some fascinating discussions about male versus female leaders, about the whole phenomenon of leadership versus management. Which one of those sort of models do we actually think is the appropriate one? And of course, it's going to be a blend of the two. Lots of interesting side threads in the discussion forum. But what I want to spend this next 4 or 5 minutes doing is just giving you my additional thoughts on the two discussion questions that were asked, because obviously that's where the meat of the comments appeared. The first one, if you recall, was about we want our organisations to be more innovative. We want them to be more engaging. What are the obstacles that are getting in the way of doing that? And there's some kind of very obvious sort of usual suspects here. There's all this stuff about big traditional organisations are very siloed. They're very risk averse. They're very kind of rule based. They've got too much process. And of course, all that is true. But of course, we've also got to look at both the broader context as well as the underlying almost psychological issues, and a couple of the points in the discussion really picked up on that. One group of people were talking all about the fact that it doesn't matter what you want to do as an organisation, you're so hemmed in by the expectations of the stock market, by the pressures for short-term results. And I think that's a very valid point. It's often the case that many of the private companies are actually the ones that are more innovative. And then the other angle, almost from below, is the fact that a lot of the issues here come down to mindset and deep beliefs. It comes down to the trust between employers and employees. It comes down to this issue of what a couple of you talked about in terms of fear, the fact that an awful lot of employees are actually fearful of trying new things, of actually kind of putting their head above the parapet for fear that it's going to be kind of chopped off, as it were. So what I think is important here is to bear in mind the full range of kind of very superficial as well as very deep obstacles. We will discuss a lot more of these as the course progresses, and I will post online also something I wrote a couple of years ago with Gary Hamill on this exact issue, looking at some of those big blockers. So that was the first discussion. The second discussion, if you recall, was about what does a world with too much information, too much knowledge look like? And these are deliberately provocative questions. You can argue that in fact you can never have too much knowledge. And I think one of the articles I posted already gave you some of my thoughts on this. It was something about what we call analysis paralysis, the risk that we get so trapped in kind of going through information that we actually kind of forget what it was we were doing in the first place. And that's certainly true. Issues around customers being very flighty and hopping from one opportunity to the next. 2 points made in the discussion, which I just want to kind of embellish on here. One is this issue around trustworthy sources. In a world of too much information, it's very difficult to know who to trust, because an awful lot of the stuff we get on the internet is by people who you don't even know who they are, and very often they're recycling old stuff, and often there's an awful lot of opinion. And I think that really illuminates the fact that in the future we're going to have to be very thoughtful about the right sort of filters that we create that help us figure out not just what's out there that we're going to find useful, but which information is actually true. There's lots of data out there that, paradoxically, people will often trust an unknown source more than they'll trust government in terms of giving them information which they can believe. So that's going to become a big issue in the future, the verification of the sort of the integrity of the sources out there. That's important. Then the second point that was raised in the discussion forum, which I hadn't picked up on so much, is this issue of kind of specialists versus generalists. The fact that increasingly, of course, people are given very narrow analytical roles, that specialist roles within the world of kind of making sense of data and pulling it together and coming up with insights around it. And I think that cautions us all to remember that it doesn't matter how specialist your role is, you've got to be able to see the big picture as well, because your ability to kind of analyze data within a box is only useful if you can then also contextualize and understand it. So it goes back to this point that I raised in one of the articles in the side readings, which is this notion that we've got to be more able to apply our whole brains to problems. We've got to be analytical and data driven, but we've also got to be prepared to rely a little bit on emotion, or emotional intelligence, if you like, and intuition, to try to understand what this sort of information is useful for. So that's a couple of thoughts. Lots more we could say on this, and please feel free to carry on those discussions. And please start on week 2's materials. And a week from now, I'm going to sit down and make a similar sort of comment around what happened in that next week. So enjoy the next part of the course.